You know those nights where your body is exhausted, but your brain is running like a full marathon? You're lying in bed, your eyes are open, you're replaying like every awkward conversation and moment you had in the day, planning your next big event and wondering things like, do octopi have feelings? Meanwhile, the clock is ticking closer to your alarm and you just know tomorrow is gonna be rough. If you have ADHD, sleep can feel like an impossible puzzle. But here's what no one tells you. Your hormones are a massive part of the problem. If you've ever felt like your ADHD symptoms get worse before your period, or that your meds just don't seem to work depending on where you're at in your cycle, or that your brain refuses to shut off at night, it's not in your head. It's definitely your hormones. Today, I'm going to take you on a deep dive into the real reasons why ADHD brains struggle with sleep, how estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol are messing with your rest, and most importantly, what you can do about it all. Plus, I'll be sharing my ADHD-friendly sleep hacks that actually work, even if nothing else has helped you before. Now listen, if you're in perimenopause, struggling with fatigue, anxiety, brain fog, weight, all those symptoms that plague us in our 40s, your sleep may be the driver of these issues. But today, you're going to get all the tools to help you fix that. And hey, if this episode resonates with you, I've put together a free 5-day ADHD Hormones and Brain Sync mini course to help you finally understand how to work with your hormones instead of against them. You can grab that at drbrighten.com/sync. That's drbrighten.com/SYNC. All right, with that said, let's get into it. Let's start with the basics. So why do ADHD brains fight sleep so much? I mean, they feel like perpetual toddlers in some ways. It's because they operate on a totally different clock than the neurotypical brains. It's not just about having bad habits or needing better discipline. Your brain is wired for delayed sleep phase syndrome. ADHD literally equals naturally delayed sleep clock. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that and let's get into the neurotypical counterpart. So a neurotypical brain starts producing melatonin roughly around 9 o'clock, so 9 p.m. But ADHD brains, it's more like midnight or later. This means you might feel tired, but wired. Your body is done, down for the count, but your brain, fully operational. So here's one action step, and you'll have a lot in today's episode to choose from. But number one action step is if you can shift your schedule to match your natural clock, you'll do better. Night owls do better with a later start time. Okay, but let's be real. That's not going to work for everyone. That's probably not going to work for most people. If that's true for you, oh my God, more power to you. Dive in. But I got like small humans and puppies running around my house keeping me up in the morning. So let's talk about other things that you can do and what is actually going to help you get better sleep. So to start this off, I'm going to explain the circadian rhythm. So let's get into the science behind ADHD and the delayed sleep phase from the perspective of what's going on with your body's internal clock, aka the circadian rhythm. Now, this is regulated by a mix of light exposure, melatonin production, dopamine levels, genetics. Like there's a lot going on. We're going to focus on the things that you can actually control. So for most neurotypical people, like I said, melatonin is going to rise starting roughly around 9, maybe 10 p.m. This signals the body to wind down. It lowers our body temperature and it gets the body prepared for sleep. You naturally start feeling tired around 10, 11 p.m. when your melatonin starts creeping at 9 to 10 p.m. But for ADHD brains, things look very different. Melatonin production is delayed by upwards of 3 hours. It's usually at least 1 to 3. So instead of feeling tired by 9 or 10, it might be more like midnight or 1 a.m. Dopamine and alertness levels can also stay higher in the evening. And we're going to talk a little bit about like things that drive that. Looking at you, doom scrolling. But this can make it harder for your brain to turn off. Not to mention, some of us with ADHD have blue light sensitivity, and that can further delay melatonin if screen time isn't managed. So here's the key insight for you. ADHD brains operate on a natural night owl schedule, meaning they feel more awake, productive, creative in the evening, even when their body is super drained and tired. Now, is this true for everyone with ADHD? No. Like, of course, we all can't be like a cookie cutter and then things be easy, right? No. So not everybody with ADHD has delayed sleep phase, okay? Not everyone's struggling with that, but it is extremely common. And studies suggest that like 75% or more of adults with ADHD show issues with delayed sleep. So it's definitely something that could be affecting you if you have ADHD. Now, on the flip side, some people are completely opposite. So in ADHD and perimenopause or postmenopause, some women notice they start getting tired earlier, and that's due to the changes of estrogen and progesterone, which can sometimes shift melatonin production earlier. Then there's the ADHD burnout camp, which I hope you never find yourself in, but if you do, let me know. I can do a whole episode on it. You can let me know. Now, chronic stress and high cortisol can cause people to crash out earlier than usual. So while the majority of people with ADHD tend to be a little bit later when they go to bed, that might not be true for you, but you may still have disrupted sleep. So I want to talk about shifting the sleep schedule. Not everyone can just adjust their work schedule to fit their natural circadian rhythm. I mean, if only it was that easy, right? So if you have a 9-to-5 job, kids like I do, other obligations, things that are shifting your sleep needs to be earlier, I want you to start training your brain. You can use light exposure to reset your circadian rhythm. First thing in the morning, 10 to 20 minutes of bright sunlight. That's just upon waking, within 30 minutes of waking. And this tells your brain, hi, it's morning. Then 2 hours before bed, we're gonna dim the lights to signal that sleep is coming. Okay, got another action step for you. Try using blue light blocking glasses or dim red lighting at night to encourage melatonin release earlier in the evening. These are some basic action steps to support melatonin production, but I want you to understand a little bit more about the dopamine melatonin connection better. And we're also going to talk about how we can actually start shifting our clock and shifting what time we go to bed. So I'm going to teach you how to shift your bedtime, but I just wanted to give you a couple of those tips so that we can help your hormones start operating the way that they need to. Okay, so did you know that dopamine and melatonin are connected? Because I feel like this is not something enough of us are talking about. And it's one of the most overlooked pieces of the entire ADHD puzzle. So according to one study titled Melatonin Dopamine Interactions from Basic Neurochemistry to a Clinical Setting, melatonin and dopamine work in opposite ways. In some ways, they inhibit each other depending on whether it's day or night. Now, this helps regulate circadian rhythms, sleep cycles, and when you're actually awake. But in ADHD, this balance is often dysregulated. I feel like dysregulated is a key word for us sometimes. And so it makes it harder to fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling rested. Now, melatonin and dopamine operate kind of like in a seesaw. So I want you to visualize, if you're listening to me, a seesaw. If you're on YouTube, you can see me. So there's, within specific parts of the brain, we have this seesaw. So during the day, dopamine is high, and it keeps us alert and engaged, while melatonin is low. At night, melatonin should rise, signaling sleep, while dopamine naturally decreases to allow rest. Now, this is where the problem happens. ADHD brains have disrupted dopamine regulation, meaning that dopamine levels may not decline properly at night. So since melatonin production is inhibited by dopamine, the delay pushes back the sleep cycle, making it harder to fall asleep at a normal time. And what's the result? The ADHD brain stays wired at night. It craves more dopamine, high doom scrolling and getting stuck on social media, and it struggles to transition to sleep. So people with ADHD often feel more alert at night. It's kind of like this dopamine melatonin tug of war. And the study I just shared with you highlights how melatonin naturally suppresses dopamine levels when it's time to sleep. So in the ADHD brain, dopamine doesn't drop the way it should, and we get those melatonin issues, and that results in several things. So 1, trouble falling asleep. 2, nighttime restlessness and hyperfocus. 3, revenge bedtime procrastination, if you know, you know. 4, waking up groggy. So I want to talk about these 4 in a little more detail. Number 1, trouble falling asleep. This is when your brain is still in day mode with too much dopamine really kind of blocking melatonin, or maybe you're getting your dopamine hits that you wish you got during the day. With nighttime restlessness and hyperfocus, this is where the brain is seeking more dopamine, and it leads to the binge watching, the scrolling, as like all of us during the pandemic with Tiger King, and the sudden productivity bursts. Then there's the revenge bedtime procrastination. This is where I'm like, all of us with ADHD are perpetual toddlers. We're staying up late to enjoy the dopamine surge that didn't happen earlier in the day. We're wanting to play. And then there's the waking up groggy. So since melatonin was delayed, the natural wake up signal, cortisol, doesn't align, leading to exhaustion in the morning. So we already talked about getting your morning sunshine and doing the darkening of your house in the evening. Because ADHD brains don't regulate dopamine effectively, you can't just force yourself to go to bed earlier. It's not going to work. And instead, what you need to do is help your melatonin rise naturally while guiding dopamine into its nighttime rhythm. So in addition to the light-dark cycles that you're going to do, we also want to give your brain controlled dopamine at night. Instead of scrolling social media, especially like news reports and stuff, which is high stimulation for dopamine, try low stimulation dopamine activities like listening to a low-key audiobook, light stretching, maybe doing a puzzle, or super chill, calm, boring reading. I just mean no like super dramatic fantasy books. All right. The other thing you can try is magnesium glycinate. That can help support melatonin, dopamine, and that glycinate component can help you stay asleep at night. Now, I talked earlier, I want you to start shifting your sleep gradually. So what does this look like? Okay, wherever your bedtime is right now, I want you to try to move it back by 15 to 30 minutes at a time. Instead of trying to force an unrealistic early bedtime, I want you to just make a little shift at a time. So if you're going to bed at midnight and the goal is 10, every few days you're going to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Okay, so from this section, I don't want your ADHD brain to fatigue. So your action step is creating like a dopamine anchor around bedtime, listening to a favorite audiobook, light stretching, essential oils, a puzzle, something that your brain will associate with sleep. Instead of forcing sleep when you're not tired, create a dopamine wind down ritual. So again, I want you to just pick one thing. Are you going to listen to an audiobook or a podcast with a low energy tone? Maybe I should try to chill out more. Is it going to be essential oils? Is it going to be fidget friendly relaxation tools like a weighted blanket, a stress ball? Are you going to do some light stretching? Or are you going to engage in low stimulation activities like puzzles, journaling, coloring, knitting? I want you to think about, what you can do as part of your bedtime routine that's going to feel good to you, that's going to make your brain feel that little happy reward without doing what social media does and pushing your dopamine to the extreme and then getting you in that I'm stuck, I can't fall asleep cycle. So I mentioned magnesium glycinate. That's one supplement that can help calm your brain and supports neurotransmitter balance. The glycine component in it, again, can help you with staying asleep at night, Collagen is rich in glycine, so drinking a beverage with glycine can help as well. And inositol is another supplement that can help with your neurotransmitters, but also sleep. So people say it makes them feel less anxious, they get better sleep at night. People also use it for weight loss, specifically when you have insulin resistant issues. So I just wanted to add that side note there because I always get questions about supplements. Okay, so we have to have some real talk about ADHD stimulants and caffeine, because if you're not using stimulant medications, you might be leaning heavy on caffeine. Stimulants taken too late in the day can absolutely keep you awake. So if stimulants are the issue, this is actually an easy fix. We're going to take them earlier in the day. Now, if caffeine is the issue, I need you to know some facts here. It has a half-life of about 5 hours, but some people are even slower metabolizers and it can take like twice as long to meet that half-life. So if you drink coffee at 2 p.m., that coffee is still going to be around 7 p.m. And if you're aiming for 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. bedtime, that's going to disrupt it. I also need you to understand that some women can metabolize caffeine slower during certain phases of their cycle, namely the luteal phase. So some women notice they're more sensitive and caffeine keeps them up more. So I definitely want you to pay attention to that. And if this is true for you, then this is your action step. And maybe it's not true for you, but if it is, you need to cut caffeine at least 8 hours before bed. And you need to try something like a low caffeine alternative in the afternoon. If you're like, but I just need a beverage because that's my reward, friend, see herbal teas as a resource, okay? Okay, so far I've given you a ton of information. So I just want to do like little recaps here. So number one is ADHD brains operate on a naturally delayed sleep cycle. It's not just bad habits. If you can't shift your schedule, you can still hack it and hack your sleep by resetting melatonin production with morning light exposure and evening dark, dark, dark. Keep your room totally dark, and 2 hours before bed, let's dim everything in the house. You can also create a pseudo dopamine powered bedtime routine and get away from doom scrolling by engaging in other activities that make you feel more relaxed. If you need to, start shifting sleep gradually by 15 to 30 minute increments and doing that for several nights before you change again. And then we want to avoid caffeine in the late afternoon. For most people, I will say we want to avoid caffeine after 12 p.m. So now that I've said all of that, let's get into my favorite part, which is the hormone talk. So how do hormones impact ADHD sleep? Well, it's not just the estrogen, it's not just the progesterone, it's also cortisol, and in some cases, histamine, which is part of the immune system, but also acts as a neurotransmitter, can be playing a role. So as we dive into hormones, this is where things get really interesting, because if you've ever felt like some weeks your sleep is great and others you're an insomniac mess, it's not random. It's something you need to track because it's hormonal. Now, I want to talk first about how estrogen helps you sleep, because this is something that can definitely impact women in perimenopause, but even in the luteal phase. So according to some studies on sleep disturbances in menopausal transition, estrogen plays a key role in regulating melatonin production. So when estrogen is high mid-cycle around ovulation, melatonin production is stable, making it easier to fall asleep. Serotonin levels are also higher, which improves sleep quality and mood, and your body temperature stays more regulated compared to what progesterone can do to it. So you're less likely to wake up from heat-related discomfort, unless you're in menopause. Then you're like, no, don't talk to me about hot flashes, lady. I do have episodes for that. I'll link to them. Now, estrogen also helps regulate cortisol, your stress hormone. They have an interplay. And lower estrogen can make us feel a little more at the mercy of stress and cause cortisol to respond to that. When estrogen is stable, our sleep is smooth. But when it fluctuates, everything feels like it's thrown off. Now, I want to talk a little more about what it looks like when estrogen drops. So when estrogen declines, which can be right before your period, or maybe you're postpartum, or during perimenopause, your body starts struggling with melatonin production. You can see melatonin levels begin to decline, making it harder to fall asleep. And that's in part because serotonin also declines, and we make melatonin from serotonin. Sleep can become more fragmented, leading to frequent night waking. And then there's the hot flashes and night sweats that I already said, which can further disrupt sleep. And if you know, then you know. And again, I will link to resources on that. Now, that one piece of estrogen can contribute to ADHD women feeling more exhausted before their period, postpartum, perimenopause. And it's not just hormone shifts, it's sleep deprivation from poor melatonin regulation, the serotonin, the stress hormones, the dopamine issues. You're probably like, stop going and let's talk about what to do about it. So let's talk. What should we do about it? Because clearly just hoping for better sleep is not going to work. All right, here are some action steps that you can take. Number one is we can support melatonin naturally. So if you are breastfeeding, magnesium glycinate and B6, those help with melatonin synthesis. They should be in your prenatal, but you probably need extra magnesium glycinate. And you can also, so you can take that breastfeeding, you can take it any other time as well. I just want to let you know it's breastfeeding safe. We can stabilize body temperature by getting a cooling pad or, bedding that breathes well. So that can help reduce sleep disruption. And then balancing blood sugar is going to be really important. And we're going to talk more about that as it relates to cortisol. But having a protein-rich snack before bed, like maybe a hard-boiled egg or some almond butter, or even like the collagen I talked about, that can help prevent the cortisol spikes. Now, at some point, you may have to consider estrogen hormone replacement therapy. I have several episodes where we talk about HRT. I will also link to those. It's very nuanced, it's very individualized, but know that most ADHD brains do benefit from estrogen hormone replacement therapy. Okay, let's talk about progesterone. Now, progesterone is a natural sedative. It helps calm your nervous system. And if it's low before your period or in perimenopause or menopause or postpartum, you may get racing thoughts at night that keep you awake. And sometimes they can feel like ruminating thoughts that just don't go away. It's also common to have more anxiety and wake ups, especially around 3 o'clock in the morning. That seems to be the key time. Hot flashes and night sweats can also accompany it because as progesterone's going down, estrogen usually is too. And for some women who have struggled with PMDD most of their life, sometimes that drop in progesterone can make it feel a whole lot worse. Now, your natural progesterone or oral micronized progesterone, not topical and not progestin, which is in the pill, your natural progesterone is metabolized to allopregnanolone, which interacts with the GABA system of the brain. I want you to think calm, chill, getting good sleep, feeling in love with everybody, and not feeling emotionally dysregulated and like your nervous system's dysregulated. I'm going to link to the Dr. Carrie Jones episode where we talked exclusively about GABA, but here's some things that you need to know. So that metabolite of progesterone, allopregnanolone, it plays a crucial role in sleep and circadian rhythm. It's essential for maintaining a stable sleep-wake rhythm, so keeping things consistent. That's very hard to have when you have ADHD. It also promotes neural proliferation and improves brain structure and function. What does that mean? It helps with brain cell production. It makes your brain work better. So we love progesterone. Now, since allopregnanolone is a metabolite of progesterone, the decline of progesterone in aging women, specifically we're talking about menopause, but this can be primary ovarian insufficiency, this can be happening in PCOS, but all of this may contribute to increased sleep disturbance. If you've had a hysterectomy and your ovaries removed and suddenly you can't sleep, that might be why. Now, the hormonal fluctuations that affect our ability to make this metabolite can explain why perimenopause and postmenopausal women experience disrupted sleep and cognitive decline. It's not just the estrogen. And when it comes to ADHD brains already struggle with sleep and memory due to the dysregulation of dopamine and their circadian rhythm. So if allopregnanolone is also low, it could further disrupt these processes. Without a doubt, we see a sharp drop in progesterone and its metabolites that affect our GABA system when we are going through menopause. And that might explain why so many ADHD women experience worsening sleep and cognitive function during this transition. Let's be real, perimenopause is way harder if you have ADHD or autism. If you are neurodivergent, your brain struggles so much more without these hormones. So supporting allopregnanolone production through progesterone, okay, that's what we want to support, is a targeted intervention. And it could be the missing piece to ADHD-related sleep and memory struggles for some people. Now, what can you do right now if you're listening to this? You can't just go take progesterone, okay? Sorry, friend. But what you can do as an action step is keep your bedroom cool, like cold, like 65 Fahrenheit, which is 18 Celsius. That's ideal. And try progesterone supporting foods. I will link to an article about how to boost progesterone and foods that you can eat for that. You can also try incorporating more vitamin C, selenium, and use something like Vitax. You'll actually find all of that in the Dr. Brighten Essentials Balanced Women's Hormone Support Supplement, which is designed to help with both progesterone and estrogen levels. I'll give you a coupon code, no pressure to buy my product, but if you are interested in it, I recommend checking it out. Now, if you're no longer able to make your own progesterone, you are going to need to talk to your doctor about progesterone hormone replacement therapy. And specifically for sleep and brain health, we need to take it orally. Typically, we're going to take 100 to 200 milligrams at night, but here's the thing. The ADHD brain may be more sensitive in the way it metabolizes progesterone or the way the receptors interact. Sometimes you need less. I have some patients that we start on 25 milligrams and other patients who do just fine on like 50 and they're great. So it just depends. And the way that we monitor hormone replacement therapy is based on your symptoms. So you need to be tracking things. And like I said, I will include links to episodes where I talk about hormone replacement therapy. I have an upcoming episode that is all about perimenopause weight loss, and that one talks extensively about what you should talk to your doctor about with hormone replacement therapy. So I will provide that to you. All right, I teased it cortisol. I've talked about it a little bit, but if you're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., then cortisol might be your problem. So sometimes falling asleep isn't the issue, but it's waking up at night. And that can be due to cortisol spikes, histamine spikes, blood sugar dysregulation, and that low progesterone issue we talked about. Now, I want to talk specifically about cortisol because this can definitely get thrown off, whether it's ADHD on its own or it's ADHD burnout. So cortisol should be high in the morning and low at night. So it spikes in the morning to wake you up, it goes down at night, and melatonin rises. But for many ADHD women and moms, it can be reversed. So things like stress, low blood sugar, high histamine, those can also contribute to the 2 to 4 a.m. wake-ups, driving that cortisol up. So we've got to work on a few things here if we want to keep you asleep. Progesterone aside, we need to talk about your blood sugar. Now, I said a protein-rich snack before bed. I also want to talk to you about upgraded golden milk. In my book, Beyond the Pill, I have a recipe in there for, it's golden milk, but you're going to add some cream or some kind of fat. You're going to add collagen, which has the glycine to keep you asleep, and some honey, which can help you stay asleep through the night. We need to also avoid high histamine foods for some people, like fermented foods, aged cheese, processed meats, right before bed. So that can't be part of dinner for some people. And then we want to calm the cortisol spikes by doing some vagus nerve activation before bed. I'll link to a resource on that for you. Doing some deep breathing or those little dopamine fixes that we talked about before, where we're doing calm things that make us feel good. Okay, this is a lot of information. So let me give you an action step. If you wake up at 3 a.m. every night, you're going to eat a high protein snack before bed, and you might want to keep one next to your bed as well. I also want you to try deep breathing exercises before going back to sleep. And sometimes this can be a body scan or 10 deep breaths before you're back to sleep. Now, as I mentioned in my book, Beyond the Pill, there's a recipe in there. I broke it down for you, but you can do this with other things as well. Having some herbal tea, like some passion flower tea, and adding some honey and adding a little bit of collagen to it. But the reason why I like the upgraded golden milk is because it has the turmeric as well, which helps with inflammation. Let's talk sleep supplements for ADHD brains. Now, melatonin might be the obvious one to jump to, and in truth, we use melatonin for a lot of reasons, not just sleep. It's protective of the brain, it is protective of the ovaries, it's got great antioxidant potential. But while melatonin can help you fall asleep, it doesn't necessarily help you stay asleep. And if you're someone who's like, I'm not ready to jump on HRT and the diet stuff is not working, then it might be time to consider some supplements. Now, if you are going to use melatonin, more is not better. Typically 1 to 3 milligrams is all it takes for someone to get to sleep. And I will say that typically in my practice, I'm only using this in people prior to their period because that's when sleep is really the hardest. Another nutrient to consider is phosphatidylserine, roughly 50 to 100 milligrams, and couple that with ashwagandha, like 100 to 200 milligrams, about 1 to 2 hours before bed. And that can help with dampening the evening cortisol. You're going to need to use it on top of sleep hygiene practices. Please don't think you can just take these supplements and that's going to be enough. You have to dim your lights. You have to get off social media. That has to happen. So I'm not going to give that disclaimer anymore, but it's always my fear that people will just think they can just take supplements and then they don't have to do any nutrition and lifestyle, and then they're going to be let down. I don't want that for you. Okay. So 2 others that I really like, passion flower, which I mentioned you can drink as a tea. Otherwise, you're taking 1 to 200 milligrams, and L-theanine, 1 to 200 milligrams with that one as well. That makes it easy to remember. These can help with GABA, that calming neurotransmitter, and help you sleep through the night. Magnesium glycinate, which I already mentioned, but I didn't give you a dose. It's about 150 to 300 milligrams nightly. That can help promote a state of calm and restfulness, and it can also help with your periods, so we love that. Another nutrient, and I mentioned it before, was inositol, but what we're looking for specifically is 2,000 milligrams of myo-inositol. So with that, that can help with blood sugar stabilization as well. So that's another way it can help you sleep through the night. Now, there's a coupon code in the show notes for Dr. Brighten Essentials that you can use to purchase any of the supplements that I formulated and mentioned here. I'll list the particular ones that go with this episode if that's helpful. You do not have to use my supplements though. Instead, you can just use the information that I shared and you can go somewhere local if that works better for you. But if this is helpful, I do want to give you the supplements that I use to help manage my perimenopause ADHD sleep struggles that I actually have under wraps. I feel pretty good about that. All right, so when it comes to supplements, you always want to check with your doctor and see what works best for you, given what medications you might be on or what health conditions you might have. So always check with your doctor on that. And you may need to experiment with things because what works for one ADHD brain may not work for another, and it can sometimes be trial and error, especially figuring out what works for you throughout your menstrual cycle. A good bet is magnesium. That helps most people overall. But outside of that, you really want to figure out what is true for you. All right, to wrap this up, I'm going to give you just a few more sleep hacks. Some are going to be a little bit of a repeat, but some of us need the repeat, so that's okay. All right, I want you to think of the 3-2-1 sleep rule for ADHD brains. 3 hours before bed, no caffeine, no big meals, no stressful work, no stressful social media, no politics. 2 hours before bed, dim the lights. Your screens must have blue light filters on them or you're wearing your amber glasses. 1 hour before bed, magnesium, audiobook, essential oils, journaling, whatever it takes to wind you down, but also feels pleasurable for you. The ADHD nighttime routine is so crucial. And I think about how we do nighttime routines for babies, but then we think just because we're adults, we don't need to do it anymore. Wrong. So you want to find what I call that gentle dopamine anchor for bedtime routine, which is something enjoyable that is going to really help your brain associate nighttime is sleep time without surging it, right? Without getting that big dopamine hit. Looking at you, artists, because this is usually when artists are like, I'm going to paint, I'm going to sew, I'm going to do all of the things. Or, you might be a college kid and it is the night before a term paper is due or something. So as often as possible, we want to have that gentle routine going so that we can really promote healthy sleep. Use a weighted blanket. If you struggle with restlessness at night, if you're somebody who has restless leg syndrome, you might want to get your iron levels checked and get that investigated because it might be something else. And another thing that might be helpful is doing a brain dump or like a journal where you just dump your mental clutter before you go to sleep. So get a journal. You don't have to write what you're grateful for. You don't have to have it structured at all. You can literally just word vomit the things everyone tells us not to do when we're out with other people. You can do this in your journal to help you get sleep. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you found this helpful. If you want further support, you can go to drbrighten.com/sync. That's drbrighten/SYNC. And I've got a short little 5-day mini course. Everything is very digestible in there. I even highlight the actionable things for you to do. And I encourage you, if you sign up for that, to actually put it on your to-do list, just to open my email, to receive my email. And that's a nice little dopamine hit too, to check off those boxes. If you try some of these strategies, I want to know, did it help you? Did you have to tweak it in any way? Was there something that you found if you combine things, it was more helpful? I'm always really curious to learn from you. Women's research is grossly lacking. We do not have enough research in women's medicine when it comes to women with ADHD. It's abysmal. It is sad. And so where doctors and other people can learn is from others who have ADHD, who are trying things out and experimenting and sharing what they find is useful. As always, I would appreciate if you could hit the subscribe button. You can leave me a comment or give us a rating. It helps us get this information out to everyone. If you enjoyed this conversation, then I definitely want you to check out this.